Open your Bibles, if you will, to the 90th Psalm, Psalm 90, and begin in verse 10. The 90th Psalm, verse 10. As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or, if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone, and we fly away. Skip down to verse 12. So teach us to number our days, that we may present to Thee a heart of wisdom. You've had another year. You've had another birthday. You've had another trip to the restaurant where servers gather around your table and sing off-key and pretend like they're enjoying it. And yet for some of us, these birthdays are beginning to pile up. You thought the big 3-0 was tough, and then the big 4-0 came, and then the big 5-0 came, and then the big 6-0 came. And now here's what I've decided. I've decided to take the Buzz Lightyear approach to this aging thing and just say to infinity and beyond. That's it. Because you can't stop it. But the question, ladies and gentlemen, is not where you are on the age range spectrum of life. That's not the question. The question is, what are you doing at whatever age you are? What are you doing now to capture significance? It's not counting your days as much as it is making your days count for something that is bigger than you are. I think most people want a life that has meaning. I think most of us want a life that has purpose. I think most of us want a life that is more than just getting up every day and going through the daily mundane minutia of busyness that we tend to engage in every day. And yet, how do we do that? And how do we have that? And where is that? Well, I want to recommend a book to you. And the book that I want to recommend to you is this one. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this book will give you a reason to live and to get up every morning and to put your feet on the ground. This book will give you clarity to your life. This book will fuel your creativity. This book will ignite your passion. This book will enable you to live on purpose, because you will learn that the secret to a happy life, the secret to a significant life, is to learn to live outside of yourself, to embrace the Jesus truth that says it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. And yet that sounds very odd. That sounds very strange in our 21st century narcissistic culture. In the 19th chapter of Matthew's account of the life of Christ, in Matthew chapter 19 and beginning in verse 16, Jesus has an encounter with a man that we just call the rich young ruler. In Matthew 19 and verse 16, the text says, "Someone came to him and said, 'Teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may obtain eternal life?'" Now, let's stop right there a moment. Let's give the man some credit. He came to the right source. He's asking the right question. And so Jesus said to him in verse 17, "Why are you asking me about what is good? There's only one who is good. But if you wish to enter into life, keep the commandments. Obey God," he says. And then verse 18, "Then he said to him, 'Which ones?'" Now, I don't know about you, but that always has struck me as odd. That Jesus says you need to keep the commandments, and here's this man who says, "Well, which ones?" Well, Jesus says, "Okay, here's some. You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said unto him, all these things I have kept. Really? He's kept all of these in every way? All of these things I have kept. What am I still lacking? Give me something else, he says. So Jesus said unto him in verse 21, if you wish to be complete, go and sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. The question is, why did Jesus tell him that? Why did Jesus say to this man, go sell your stuff, liquidate it, and give money to the poor people? Why did Jesus say that to him? Because Jesus could read his heart. Because Jesus knew that to this young man, life was all about one thing and one thing only. It was about self. That was it, self. And ladies and gentlemen, that's how a lot of people live. They have the mindset that says, I want it all, and I want it now, and I want it all, and I want it now for me. What's in it for me? And so life becomes all about fame, and life becomes all about fortune, and life becomes all about friends on social media and all that kind of stuff. That's what matters the most to a lot of people. And my question to you tonight is that the message we are sending to our kids? Is that the message we communicate to our families? If that's the case, then we've missed it, and we've missed it bad. You see, I thought we were talking about faith and getting real about faith and all of that. We are. You got to get real about your faith at home. And so I want to take just a few moments of your time tonight. And in this congregation, there's so many young families with kids. I want to talk to you about searching for significance with your kids, with your family, because that's where it starts. You know, from the time that our kids are small, during the formative years of their life, if we are not very careful, we can very easily enroll them in the rat race of life. You take the K through 12 years. There is a rat race, an unwritten rat race, that the day they walk into kindergarten, they've got to get good grades. We have several of our members who are school teachers, and several, probably half a dozen or 8 who are elementary school teachers. And I was talking to one day, and they said, you know, the elementary school teachers are stressed because the kids are stressed, and the kids are stressed because the parents are stressed, which comes right back to the teachers, and we're stressed. Everybody's stressed. Why? Because the American educational success formula is quite clear. You've got to have great grades from the moment that you walk into kindergarten so we can get you into a great school, so we can get you a great job, so you can get a great life. And nobody ever stops to ask the great big elephant in the room question, and that is, why? Why? What is the meaning of all of this? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of it all? There was a California student a few years ago who got the perfect score on her SAT. And Stanford University in Palo Alto, California, rolls out the red carpet for her. Full ride. And an insightful interviewer asked her this question. What is the meaning of life? And this young lady who got the perfect score on her SAT said, beats me. I have no idea. Why would she say that? Because most kids have no idea. Why would they say that? Because their parents don't have any idea. The purpose of the K through 12 formative years, ladies and gentlemen, moms and dads, is not to get our kids in a great university. What we're trying to do is prepare our young people for life, to get them to a place where they know the answer to the question, what is the purpose of it all? And the purpose of life, well, it can have various degrees to it. The purpose of life is to help our young people grow up and find meaningful work, something they're passionate about, something they're excited about, something that combines their talent and their passion, their opportunities. And so as parents, we guide them in certain ways along those lines. And that's part of it. Or to find relationships to nurture and to help our young people understand that relationships and people come before profits, to help them understand all of that. Part of the purpose of life is to help them find a cause that's bigger than themselves, something they can embrace, some way to give back to the world that is given to them. But above all of those things, the core of finding the meaning of life is to have a relationship with the Creator of all life. When you get to the end of the book of wisdom in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, he says the conclusion is fear God and keep His commandments. And that is the conclusion of the whole thing. Because God's going to bring every act to judgment, everything that is hidden, whether good or bad. And so that's what we need to be teaching our kids. That's what we need to be helping them find. There's a little verse tucked away in the minor prophets. In Micah chapter 6 and verse 8, Micah says, He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? What does God want from me? He says, to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Now my question is, where are our kids going to learn that? Do you think they're going to learn that from their peers? Do you think they're going to learn that in the American educational system? Do you think they're going to learn that on social media? Do you even think they're going to learn that in a couple hours of a Bible class by a local church? Where are they going to learn that? That's why I say faith building in the hearts of our kids starts at home. The average American kid today spends 7 hours of every day plugged into a device. Did you know that? The average American teenager today sends 3,147 text messages a month, over 100 a day. I think that's a very low estimate. 97% of teenagers have electronic devices in their bedrooms. And I'll tell you something I read the other day, a book by a pediatrician. He said that is an absolute no-no. He says, you don't know how many young people I have to treat for all kinds of diagnoses. And he says, when you strip away a lot of the stuff, he says what's going on is sleep deprivation. That's what's going on. And so our kids are plugged in and tuned out at an alarming rate. And so peer world has replaced parent world as the number one influencer in their lives. Now you can argue and say that's always been the case, and that would be true, but never to the extent that it is today. Never. Because social media has changed everything. And you see it when you go to a restaurant, don't you? Here's a couple of kids sitting at a table with their mom and dad, and the kids are clueless. They're tuned out. She's on her phone, he's on his phone, and then you wonder why that is, and then you look at mom and dad. And mom's on her phone and dad's on his phone. So much for family togetherness. That's where we are in our culture. And what I'm saying to you is somehow, in some way, somebody has to create a counterculture than that. Somebody has to take a different path. And the place you're going to have to make a decision to do that is in your home. In the 6th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, verse 7, verse 8, and verse 9. Deuteronomy chapter 6, beginning of verse 7, he said, you, parents, You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead, and write them on the doorpost of your house and on the gates. And this must have really been important, because when you get over to Deuteronomy chapter 11, Moses preaches the same sermon again, almost word for word. That's in chapter 11, verses 18, 19, and 20. And what Moses is telling these parents, take your homework seriously. It is raising our kids to learn about respect and virtue and character and integrity and God. And none of that is some kind of extra credit assignment. That is the mandatory assignment. If you're a mom, if you're a dad, that's the assignment. Go back to verse 1 of Deuteronomy chapter 6. Look at verse 1. He says, now this is the commandment, the statutes, the judgments, which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you. Underline it. Moses stands up here in front of these parents and he says, God has commanded me to tell you these things. He's not just out here blowing smoke. This is mandatory. And if it was mandatory for them, it is mandatory for us. It is raising our kids to love and honor God first rather than self first. It's raising them to understand the world does not revolve around them. That is paramount to their success. It is raising them to embrace the principle it is more blessed to give than to receive, because when they do that, it will equip them for life and help them to understand, hey, I have a higher calling. I have a purpose for being here. What is the purpose of life? Good question. It's not how you look. It's not how many friends you have on social media. It's not your grade point average. It's not how athletic you are. It's not how musically inclined you are. It is none of those things. It is helping our kids get connected with God. That's the assignment. That's the parental responsibility. And you're not going to get any help from culture. And you're not going to get any help from other parents sometimes. And I hate to say this, but you're not going to get any help from some Christian parents. But you and I have got to get serious about this. Go back to verse 4 of Deuteronomy chapter 6. He said, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. Before he ever says a word about teaching them diligently and talking to them about these things when they lie down and rise up and walk by the way and sit in the house and all of that, before he ever says any of that, he says, you, mom, dad, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart. Why? Because you can't give your kids something that you don't have. Kids are resilient. They are resilient. They can handle about anything. But there's one thing a kid cannot handle. Do you know what it is? Hypocrisy. And a kid can spot it a mile away. That's why our faith has to be real, and that's why it has to be real at home. And then Moses does an odd thing, verse 2. So that you, generation 1, and your son, generation 2, and your grandson, generation 3, might fear the Lord your God. Here's Moses talking to these parents about their grandkids when most of them didn't have any. Do you realize that? If you know your Old Testament, you understand that all of the older people have died in the wilderness. Now, there were some old enough to have grandchildren, no doubt, but the vast majority of these people would have been young moms and young dads with kids, and Moses stands up there and says, now let me talk to you about your grandkids. You can just see people in the audience go, well, we don't have any grandkids. Why does Moses talk to these young parents about their grandkids? Because one day they'll have them. And Moses says, I want you to think beyond today. I want you to think beyond today. I want you to think about tomorrow. I want you to think about your kids, and I want you to think about how your kids, they may be little, but in time they're going to grow up and they're going to have kids and you're going to be grandparents, and you need to think about that. And his message is what you do today may determine whether or not they know you're God, the God. I looked up on the pulpit area a couple Sunday mornings ago, and there were probably 8 little girls, and they must have planned this out. After church, there were about 8 little girls, and they're kind of over here in this spot, and they'd all brought little dolls with them. And they were all just sitting up there, and I mean, they were in another world. And I thought to myself, look at those. And those little girls are going to grow up. And those little girls are going to become teenagers. And those little girls are going to become adults. And those little girls are going to get married. Those little girls are going to have girls and boys of their own. That's just the way life is. And Moses is helping these young people try to see past today. And his message is pretty simple. Don't let culture kill your kids. Don't let culture capture them. Shake off the shackles of indifference and connect with your family while you have time. And why was that so important? Because the people surrounding them were going to have different values. And Moses is challenging them to stay connected with their families. And here's another thing to think about. Are we teaching our kids how to walk humbly with God? Or is it all about self-esteem? We live in a time in which it's all about self-esteem. Help make sure, and I get the fact that some kids need boost in that. They need help with that. I get that. But let's not forget to teach them how to be humble. That came home to me the other day when I read about a 3rd grade student was asked to describe himself in 3 words. This little 3rd grade boy wrote, I am awesome. I am special. I am a genius. G-E-A-N-I-U-S. Genius. I don't think self-esteem was his problem. So how? How do we do this? How do we teach our kids to walk humbly with God in an era of narcissism? How do we do that? How do we teach our kids to be respectful in a culture of disrespect? How do we do that? I'm going to leave you with 5 things. If you've got something to write with, I'm going to give you 5 things. 5 simple ways to do this. Y'all got ready? You ready to write? Huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You girls ready? Huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm going to leave you with 5 things that will help us do this. Number 1. You ready? You're going to love this one. Chores. C-H-O-R-E-S. Chores. Require your kids to participate in age-appropriate chores. There's things they can do as time goes on. They can learn how to make a bed. They can learn how to help you set a table. They can pets. When they get older, they can mow lawns. They can vacuum the house. They can take out the trash. They can do laundry. They can do a lot of those things as they grow up. What are you trying to do? You're trying to help them understand life lesson 101. The world doesn't revolve around them. Contribute to the family. You are not here to be served, but to serve and to give. And you begin to communicate to them a little bit at a time. I know a lady whose son wouldn't clean up his room. And she told him, said, you got to clean up your room before I take you to soccer practice. And so the time came to leave. He comes bounding down the stairs. And he says, I need to go to soccer practice, Mom. And she says, I only take boys to soccer practice who've cleaned up their room. And he says, come on, Mom, we got to get going. I'll clean it up as soon as I get back. I promise I'll clean it up when we get back. And she said, maybe you didn't hear me. I only take boys to soccer practice who have cleaned up their room. Oh, come on, Mom, we've got to go. I'll clean it up when we get back. If I'm late, Coach is going to make me run laps. We've got to get there and get on time. And she just looked down, started reading her magazine again, turned the page and said, last time, I only take boys to soccer practice who have cleaned up their room. And he realized she wasn't budging. And she said he went back to his room, and in a few minutes I heard a sound I had not heard in a long time. The vacuum cleaner was running. And she said he cleaned up his room. And I took him to soccer practice. And I even stayed late and watched him run those laps. That is one tough mama. I like her. When our kids turned 16, and we raised 4, and they're all grown and married, but when they turned 16, it was a rite of passage in our home. We'd have a big party and all that kind of thing, but they also knew what was coming. Because when each of them turned 16, they got the keys to the washing machine. Because when they hit 16, you know, the kids are always saying, you know, treat us like quit treating us like a kid. Okay. From now on, you do your own laundry. And it is amazing to me how young people are so high-tech in every kind of thing that plugs in except a washing machine. Suddenly, they don't know how to operate it. It's not that hard. Craig, you remember there were kids at Florida College, they didn't know how to do laundry. You know, I mean, come on. Chores. As members of a family, there's obligations in the family, and from the earliest of ages, we can teach our kids, contribute to the family in age-appropriate ways. Secondly, unplug those devices. Well, that makes me popular. Unplug those devices. There's some positive things about social media and all of that, but not if it's just taken to such an extreme and excess. It can become an addiction. And I know that is a tough word, but it is true. It is addicting. And I go places to preach, and I stand in the foyer, and I hold out my hand to shake the hands of young people coming through, and some of them are way before the teenage years, and some of them walk through, and I'm standing there trying to catch their eye and shake their hand, and they just blow right by me. Why? Because their face is in a screen. I have some friends that have 4 teenagers at home, and they have a day, they call it No Tech Tuesdays. And nobody is allowed in the family to do anything on No Tech Tuesday that plugs in. And so they just, in the wintertime, they play games. In the summertime, they go outside. They do things as a family. I have another friend that runs a camp, and when he starts the camp, all the phones have to be turned in from all the kids. They turn your phone in. And it's like, he says, some kids have withdrawal. They have withdrawal. It's like they don't know how to talk to real people. And some of them don't. Our son Dale has been in law enforcement for years, our oldest son. And one of the things that he specializes in is this digital, all the digital world. And he goes all over the country and talks to churches and groups and different things about talking really to parents and kids, but how to parent in this digital world. It's not easy, and there's things you need to know. And he says so many times people will come up and say, well, my son would never do that. My daughter would never do that. And he says, I look at them and go, yes, they would. Because peer pressure is tough. Don't be naive. That's why the Bible says over and over and over again, do not be deceived. Because the world will deceive us, and the world will deceive our kids. Don't let it happen. Number 3, eat together as a family. No devices, no television. Sit down and eat together as a family. I think that's what Moses is talking about in Deuteronomy chapter 6. When they sit in your house, what an opportunity. The most valuable piece of furniture we have in our home is an old oak table. That's our kitchen table. And that table has seen us raise 4 and now 3 more. And that table has seen tears, and that table has seen all kinds of stuff. It still stands. These young kids we adopted, they never sat down at a table before. They never had a family before. And mealtime to them, supper time to them is the most important part of their day. I mean, I pick Christopher up from school every day. First question, every day I get him in the car and he says, "What's Mom cooking tonight?" They look so forward to that. And we sit around the table, and when the meal is done, we still sit and visit and talk and laugh. And every Monday night, and I'm missing it tonight, but every Monday night, after the meal is over, we journal together as a family. Everybody has a journal. And we sit there, and for an hour, we'll write and then we'll talk. And the journal always begins with these words: "Today I feel," then they can write whatever they want to write. And they can tell about their feelings, they can tell about their day, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of that kind of thing. And when it's over, we read them to one another and we talk about it. And everybody looks forward to Monday night when we can journal as a family. And last Monday night, this boy came over. Now, Leah is 17, almost 18, and she's 4'11". This boy is 6'2". From church. She's a good kid, and they kind of like each other. And so after supper was over, last Monday night, I said, "All right, we're going to journal." Well, Jacob didn't have a clue. So I handed him a legal pad, and I said, "Here's your journal. And you start out, 'Today I feel,' and go from there." And so Julie wrote, I wrote, Leah wrote, we're all writing. We're all done. We lay our pens down, kind of waiting to get done, and Jacob's still writing. He's right. He wrote more than anybody. And Julie sent me a text this afternoon and said, "Guess who wants to come over today? Guess who wants to come over tonight for supper?" Eat together as a family. That's when we connect with one another. Number 4, don't overschedule their lives. As a culture, we are so into organized activities. Do you know we do to our kids what we complain about ourselves? And that is, we overload their lives, their schedule. Help your children learn discipline. Help your children understand they can't have everything, they can't do everything, they have choices. Help them select good ones. And whatever you select for them to do, don't let it become the master. And don't let it steal the most important aspect of your life, and that is a spiritual priority. Because when we overcommit, something has to give, someone has to give, and you and I know who that will be. Guess what message we send to our kids when we let that happen? And last, get outside and do something together as a family. Get outside and do something together as a family. There was a dad who's having trouble with his teenage son. And he didn't know what he's going to do, and so he's in the winter, and he takes his son and says, "Hey, I just want to spend a day with you, and let's go to the mountains." And so he takes his son, and they drive up into the mountains to a place where there was a skiing and all that kind of thing, but they had winter tubing. And so he said, we drove all the way there, and said, my boy sat there, his face looking out the window. He's sulking, he's mad. His earbuds are in, he's listening to his music. He's not engaging me at all. And he said, I thought to myself, what a waste of my day. And we get there, and we buy our ticket, and we get our tubes, and we're riding up the lift, and we're getting ready to come down, and he's still sulking, and he's like, man, I might as well stayed home. And he said, we rode down the first time, and he said, I happened to come out a little bit ahead, and so we got to the bottom, and I grabbed my tube, and he grabbed his inner tube, and he said, the next thing I knew, he had the biggest smile on his face, and he says, come on, Dad, that's going to be the last time you beat me down. And he ran back to the lift, and he said, we spent all day on the mountain, And he said, on the way home, it was totally different. He said, there was no music. He said, we talked like father and son. We stopped and ate. We had a great meal. We just had a great time. I hate golf. I don't like golf. But after my son Luke had played football by the time he was a sophomore in high school, he was done. I mean, he fell in love with the game of golf. And for 3 years in high school he played, and he just loves it. And I figured it out that if I'm going to spend time with my son, I needed to play golf because that's what he did. And so I go down to Play It Again Sports, and I put down a lot of money for a set of golf clubs, $99. And I buy me a set of golf clubs. And then I splurged on some golf balls because the only ball I use is Wilson. Because that way I can remember my ball. And so we'd go out and we'd play golf. We played on we kind of started out playing on an old 9-hole course over by the VA. You know, have you ever played one of those cow pasture courses where it's kind of like that. But we played all kinds of different places around, and he's the only one I've ever played with, and we just have a blast. I shoot 90 every time. Because he keeps score, and he'll shoot usually par or right around there, and he's really good. And he'll say, what'd you get on that hole, Dad? And I said, 5. I always get 5. I don't care. Just put me down for 5. Because you feel good when you can shoot a 90. And I'll say, hey, look at there, my ball's right next to your ball. And he said, Dad, you've hit it 3 times to get it here. Doesn't matter. Give me 5. I don't care. I'm just out hanging out with my son. That's all I care about. He called last week and said, hey, I'm coming for Easter for a long break. He lives in Kansas City now. He said, I'm going to bring my golf clubs. I said, okay, we'll go play. He said, let's go play at that old VA course where we used to play. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, let's go play there. I said, okay. I wonder why he wants to go play there. In 1995, I bought a 1971 Chevy pickup for $1,600. And I brought that thing home. It was beautiful primer gray, and Julie cried. She said, you spent $1,600 on this? I said, honey, the body's good, the engine's strong, the transmission's good. Deo was 14 at the time, our oldest son, and that became his baby. And we'd save up a little money, and we'd paint it cherry red. We'd save a little bit more money, and we'd put new tires on it, new dash, new wheel, new interior, straight pipes. And when he was 16, I threw him the keys. And he drove Big Red all through high school. And I say, the reason you went into law enforcement is because you spent so much time on the side of the road with them. But we just, we'd have so much fun with that old truck. And Crystal, she loved horses. We lived out in the country, and so we had a couple. We had a horse, it was a Tennessee walking horse. It was in Tennessee, and it was old, and all it wanted to do was walk. So it was a Tennessee walking horse. And Crystal loved to go to the rodeo, so we'd take her to the rodeo. And she loved barrel racing, and so every time we'd come home, and she'd get the Rubbermaid trash cans out in the field. She'd put them apart, and she'd try to barrel race that old horse. And I'm no horse whisperer or listener, but if the look in that horse's eyes said anything, it said, please quit taking her to the rodeo. But that's what she enjoyed. You know the point that I'm making. Do whatever it takes. Because when it comes to our kids, you got one shot. One. Don't blow it. Because we live in a crazy culture. We live in a crazy world. And it's a world in which kids need their parents more than ever. Be that parent. Be the parent. Your job, Mom, is not to be your daughter's girlfriend. That's not your job. And Dad, your job is not to be your son's best buddy. That's not your job. Your job is to be the parent. Somebody has to be the adult in the house. That's you. And that's what Moses is trying to tell these young parents. This isn't optional. He said, God has commanded me to tell you these things. It wasn't easy then, and it's not easy today. May God help us to raise our families as we should by setting the right kind of example in front of them. We sing the song of invitation. If you're not a Christian, why don't you become a part of God's family? Give your life to Jesus Christ and be buried in baptism for the remission of your sins and be determined to walk with Him. Doesn't mean everything in your life's going to go great. It just means you're going to have more help than you realize you could ever have. And can we help make that happen? There's people here tonight who will help make that happen. Won't you come while we stand together and sing together?